In Gaza, people are still suffering. That's not something that should be a normal thing, and that's not something that people can pass by. People are still living under severe conditions after 1 year of this genocide and barbarism committed by the genocide state and supported by the United States administration and its proxies across the world. And now they're saying that we want to stay in Gaza. We're having more reports from Israeli sources saying that no, we want to stay in Gaza. Well, they have people, of course, some of those from the squatting establishment saying that, well, it's ours. Gaza's part of the Jewish state, and now we have confirmation coming from officials that no, we're going to remain in Gaza after the war. However, we had an elaboration and a comment on that coming from a senior Hamas figure. His name is Osama Hamdan, saying that this is part of Israel's psychological warfare. I mean, the level of resilience that these people have is beyond comprehension. Israel's been committing a genocide and all of these atrocities for the past year, but the people inside of Gaza and the leadership of Hamas and the other movements in Gaza, they still know the tricks that are coming from Israel, and they're not falling for it. And we had another elaboration when it comes to the ceasefire talks from Hamas, saying that it's basically nothing. Nothing is happening when it comes to the ceasefire. All that they've heard was this proposal of a quiet period for a few days, and in return, they would release some of the Israelis held in Gaza. So nothing is progressing or appears to be progressing on that front. There are more indications that we're about to reach some sort of a ceasefire in Lebanon, but again, that's coming from Israel. And we had many periods where we had talks coming from Israel saying that we are about to reach a ceasefire, and then nothing happened. And now the latest reports coming from Israel saying that, it's just around the corner. It's 2 weeks, 2 weeks away, because this is a very harsh war. And talking about the harsh war, today Hezbollah, they released a new video of their new underground facility called Imad 5. Imad 5 following the release of their underground facility Imad 4. That had trucks roaming around underground holding heavy missiles. Now they have a new facility with the image of the late martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah under the title, "We will not leave the battlefield and we will not put our arms down." And they're not putting their arms down. They are not putting their arms down. Today we saw footage of Hezbollah. Well, firstly, the sirens are not stopping in the Geno state all across. Bang, 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 24/7. Talk about, hurting their capabilities. And of course, the genocide forces want to portray an image of victory for their defeated followers. And they're going through certain villages in Lebanon in a limited period, and they're putting like an Israeli flag. And like I said before, the prices of the Israeli flag is them going back in coffins. And that's what's happening today. Hezbollah published a video where they took down Geno forces in a Lebanese village close to the borders. And of course, they're exploding these places, walking, a dozen or so. And one of them is trying to put an Israeli flag on the top of a house. Then Hezbollah had a direct missile attack, heat-guided missile, next to the group, taking down several, to say the least. And again, no talks from Israel. I think it's a couple of days they'll say, we have a couple of more casualties in Lebanon. The other day they said, a vehicle turned upside down with the commander of the North in it, as if they want us to believe that this man all of a sudden had an accident in a vehicle, not being targeted by the resistance in Lebanon. Similar to this Yossi Sariel guy, the head of the 8,200 unit. Has anyone seen him? I haven't seen him. Where is he? They said he resigned. Where did he go? We haven't seen a video of him. No ceremony saying goodbye to the man after his resignation, serving for several years, and usually have ceremonies. I haven't seen anything. But of course, the Geno state will keep hiding its losses. again, to undermine the effectiveness of the resistance against them that is coming from Lebanon. And we're seeing the effects. We're seeing the effects today. Israel started to withdraw from Al-Khiyam. Al-Khiyam is close to the occupied territories, inside of Lebanese territories, of course. And they're withdrawing. Well, where's all of the talk about we want to control Lebanon and we want to eliminate Hezbollah and they have to go back to the north and. Nothing. And they were forcing them to withdraw. How are they forcing them to withdraw? By fighting them, by standing up against them. Not by telling them, Israel, please withdraw, and not by talking to the United Nations and asking for people to condemn the actions of a criminal entity. So that means there is effectiveness still, increased resistance coming from Lebanon. It's forcing Israel to take certain actions and come up with statements that are contradictory to their objectives of the war. When you're saying, oh, we're about to reach a ceasefire in 2 weeks, well, you haven't accomplished anything. What have you accomplished? The only thing they've accomplished is destruction and killing people. That's what they usually do, you know. But when it comes to the Lebanese resistance, they haven't been able to even touch their capabilities. They are still attacking the genostate on a daily basis, increasing their reach and targeting more of the occupiers in Lebanese territories, which leads us to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. We're having these talks about a ceasefire. We're monitoring them. And again, I always said, and I repeat, it's not about being pessimistic or optimistic, hopeful or not hopeful. It's observing what we're seeing in front of us, what is being published, and trying to analyze and understand what's happening to see where things are going or potentially going to. Now, when the Iranian country, when Iran had an attack, when Israel had an aggression against Iran just over a week ago, they were in a phase of absorbing the hit, and then we started to have certain statements coming from Iran, and the statements weren't necessarily harsh. You know, we have the right to respond, and now we're having more harsher tones, and I'll get to that in a sec. But at the time, we said that Iran might be using their pending response as leverage when it comes to the negotiations. And now we have a confirmation of that. But that confirmation, the different thing about it is not excluding a response. It's just talking about the severity of the response. So we had this article coming following some statements being made by the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, saying that if the Israeli entity commits any mistake against Iran, it will receive a harsh response. But the contents had more detail. President Masoud Pezeshkian said the leaders of the Israeli entity know that if they commit any mistake against Iran, they will have receive a harsh response. Meaning they're receiving a harsh response. They're going to receive one following the attack. If they reconsider their behavior, accept a ceasefire, and stop killing innocent people in the region, this may affect the severity of the response. So the response is coming regardless. But, you know, we might tone it down slightly. We might tone it down just a little bit if you behave. If you behave and if you stop slaughtering women and children. He continued, they continued, well, Tasnim International News Agency reported that in a statement while chairing the cabinet meeting on Sunday, President Pezeshkian commemorated the National Day of Fighting Arrogance. The National Day, Iran has a National Day of Fighting Arrogance. I think that's a national day that many countries should celebrate. Stating that all our lofty national and revolutionary principles manifested in confronting injustice and struggling for freedom and justice, and at the same time, the spirit of coexistence and peace are all crystallized in this national day. He continued by saying, we have never launched any war, nor have we incited any country to do so. Rather, it is America that has always tried to ignite the fires of wars around the world, including our region. Today, it is providing support to the Zionist entity to continue its war in the region. President Pezeshkian condemned the deceptive positions of America and the West in the face of the crisis they created in the region, saying, all regional countries have reached this conviction, and certainly the Islamic Republic of Iran seeks stability and peace, while the Zionist entity is working to escalate the crisis and the war in the region. Referring to the aggressive and criminal practices of the Zionist entity in order to expand the circle of war in the region, the president of the Islamic Republic stressed it was the Zionist entity that was seeking, through the assassination of Martyr Haniya in the first day of our government's work, to incite war. And despite our insistence of self-restraint, in accordance with the advice of some countries, and in the hope of establishing a ceasefire and ending the massacres against innocent women and children, it sought to intensify its crimes and expand the scope of its aggression and criminality to Lebanon. He also touched on the deceptive positions of American and European countries regarding the crisis they created in the region, asking if these countries were sincerely seeking to stop the war and bloodshed, then why do they use the veto to abort draft resolutions aimed at a ceasefire? According to Irna, Pezeshkian denounced the behavior of human rights advocates and their weak positions regarding the massacres that target tens of thousands of oppressed women and children in Gaza and Lebanon by the Zionist entity. He concluded by saying, we have never bombed the women and children of Palestine with bombs and missiles, nor have we deprived any people of water, food, or medicine, while those who committed all these crimes against humanity and shamelessly directing false accusations at Iran, claiming that they are forcing people to follow their desires, but it is a feeble attempt because the free people of the world have never and will never submit to injustice. So clearly, Iran is using its spending response as leverage when it comes to the ceasefire. Again, not to raise too many hopes, but clearly they are using that leverage to achieve a political goal. And that political goal, you try and achieve it by any way possible. Now, will Israel allow that to happen? Will Israel allow, and we'll talk about the level of response now because we have more elaboration, and the fact that we have the US aircraft carrier withdrawing, that they covered it up with the sending of the B-52 bombers in a sec. But will Israel accept that? I don't believe so. Israel is too arrogant to accept the fact that Iran imposed the ceasefire. Why? Because it would send a message to the world that it was Iran that was able to stop the war by armed force. Again, showing that Israel, again, only understands the language of force. For those who are, stupid enough, excuse me for the word, to still believe that they do not understand anything but the language of force. Israel and its supporters, its backers, only understand the language of force because that's the only language they deal with at a mass scale through mass terror and mass war crimes and mass wars across the world. Ever since the last 100 years, past century, really, that's all that they've been doing. Now, when it comes to the actual response, what do we have? We have a couple of details coming out about the potential, and we spoke about them, of retaliation coming from Iraq. Now, that's not something that can be ruled out. Why? Because the Israelis used the Iraqi airspace to bomb Iran. They did not even dare to come close to Iran. They're that coward. So, some projectiles reached, some landed, most of them were intercepted by the Iranian air defense systems, the Bavar 373 and other systems that they have, and that was very visible. Now, what are they going to attack with? What are they going to do exactly? Well, we had reports that this time they're going to be using more complex attack methods. And that report, again, it came from the Wall Street Journal, but they said that Iran is preparing a complex attack, and it's the Iranian army who will be participating this time. Usually the IRGC conducts the foreign attacks, but this time the Iranian army will be participating as well. Why? Because Israel targeted Iranian army bases. Look, they were that coward with their attack that they didn't even come to the IRGC, but they went ahead against the Iranian army. Of course, both of them are armies in Iran. But now what have they done? Well, they've said, okay, now we have the army as well. Not just the IRGC, the army as well. And they're going to be participating with what? A complex attack that will what? Include larger warheads. That's what's coming on the genocide entity. And we have these reports about the US bombers, the B-52s, coming to the region. Again, flexing muscles by the dying empire, the collapsing empire. They're trying to flex muscles. Like, you haven't intimidated anyone with anything. What do you think B-52 bombers will intimidate the region? These people put their lives on the line for their dignity and for their rights. You think B-52 bombers are going to intimidate them? But anyway, they published that to cover up the fact that they withdrew their last aircraft carrier in the region. So we had Eisenhower moving out of the region, or being kicked out, forced out, following attacks by Ansarullah in Yemen. And now we have another aircraft carrier, USS Abraham Lincoln, to leave the Middle East. So we had this report here in the Times of San Diego reporting about this, saying that they are leaving. They are leaving, and in the meantime, we won't have an aircraft carrier in the region, sending bombers and warships instead. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln is returning to San Diego, leaving the Middle East. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is sending additional bomber aircraft and Navy warships to the Middle East to bolster the U.S. presence in the region. The decision comes as an aircraft carrier and its warships are preparing to leave. According to a U.S. official, the USS Abraham Lincoln and 3 Navy destroyers and its strike group are scheduled to leave the Middle East by mid-month and return to their home port in San Diego. The Lincoln and 2 of its destroyers are now in the Gulf of Oman, and the 3rd destroyer is with 2 other warships in the Red Sea. Austin ordered several B-52 Stratofortress bomber aircraft, tanker aircraft, and Navy destroyers to deploy to the Middle East. According to the 4 U.S. defense officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss troop movements. They continue, it's a critical time as Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon rage in spite of the official press for a ceasefire. The U.S. has repeatedly said it will defend Israel and continue to protect American allied presence in the region, including from Yemen-based Houthi attacks against ships in the Red Sea. Okay, you're sending B-52 instead of the USS Lincoln. What's bigger in terms of intimidation and in terms of capabilities? The destroyer, not the B-52 bomber. So they're trying to cover up the fact that they're withdrawing the aircraft carrier by sending the B-52 bombers. Of course, not to undermine their destruction capability. And of course, the United States is a country that supports genocide. So we know very well that they use their weapons of mass destruction against innocent people and innocent civilians. However, this is an important development. The fact that they are withdrawing the USS Abraham Lincoln, but sending the B-52 bombers. Okay. Is that going to change anything when it comes to Iran's attack on Israel? Well, they say that the B-52 is able to intercept some of the missiles, again, more than the destroyers, the aircraft carriers, and all of the fleet. They already sent to the F-22 Raptors, and they have everything in the region. Is that gonna be the key thing that changes the whole scene? No, it's not going to. And again, it's not going to stop the resistance. It's not going to stop Iran as well. It's a show. It's a show. And mind you, like when they sent the aircraft carrier to the Mediterranean, immediately following the 7th of October Al-Aqsa flood operation, their aim was to intimidate Hezbollah and Iran, and they left 2 months later. The Israeli side was very concerned. They tried to lobby to keep them back in because, according to them, well, we're still here, there's still war, Hezbollah haven't put in their full weight in, and we still haven't had a response from Iran. And all of that came after that. Then we had a response from Iran that was very large, very accurate. Most of the missiles landed with the presence of the USS Abraham Lincoln. And what did it do? Nothing. So what are these bombs? Are they going to be roaming the skies 24/7? If you have an attack, okay, and you want to participate with your air force to try and take down the missiles, well, you need to be in the air 24/7. So either you will have prior knowledge or have very, very short notice, in which case you're not going to be able to do much with them anyway, if that's saying if they have capabilities. However, Israel again is unlikely to have a ceasefire with the conditions of Iran. Not because it's the wrong thing to do, but because they're too arrogant. It's an arrogant entity that is very entitled and very supremacist, and it's very difficult for them to accept the fact that Iran is, putting its foot down in the region, and no, they're forcing us to take a step back and stop the war, stop the genocide that's happening. So what will most likely happen? Well, we have preparations. Today, we had multiple reports coming from Israel saying that they are now are at very high levels of alertness and readiness to an Iranian attack, meaning it's almost like the 0 hour time just before Iran attacked. Meaning, well, we might have something tonight. Who knows? We might see an Iranian attack very soon on Israel. And Iran doesn't consider, they don't consider the US elections and all of that. And even with the statements of the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian saying that if they, don't improve their behavior, it's not as if he's trusting them to improve their behavior. That's also sending a message to show everything that's happening. And again, Iran will do everything on its conditions in the time that's suitable for them. But clearly, from the tones that we're having and that we spoke about yesterday and that are coming out every single day from Iran, that response is coming. And Israel is preparing for it to come at any given moment, indicating an increased escalation following that. Now, the question is, what's going to happen after that? Are we going to continuously have a tit for tat between Israel and Iran? Which is a valid question. Well, there is a possibility that might happen, but with more delays between the responses, in particular coming from the Israeli side. Why? Because from an Israeli perspective, the attack on Iran taking so many fighter jets to the region is a very complex attack. It's something that takes a lot of resources. Iran is very far geographically, and it's not like Israel can go and conduct attacks by the hour on Iran. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen unless that is someone close by is participating with Israel. So the fighter jets are going from a base nearby. However, we had clarifications from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar that they will not be allowing any participation. And with their attack from the Iraqi airspace, they again used the US used Iraqi airspace, which also is raising more tensions in Iraq. And we have more talks about just kick off the remaining empire forces from Iraq, the remaining 5,000 or 6,000. And that's it. We need to get rid of you because, well, the United States presence in the region is only trouble. That's it. Wherever you see US presence, you have trouble. Trouble, murder, slaughter, death, killing, civil wars, genocide. That's what they do. That's what they do. And it's about time that the United States understands that the world is changing. They need to withdraw. They need to take their troops back. Focus on the United States. Focus for once in your life on the US citizens, on the average US citizen, on their healthcare, on their education, on their economic positions. You send them 750 per person, wasn't it? For the survivors of the hurricane, when the average is 2,500 for Israel. Well, what is that exactly? And we have people talking about America first in America. Talk about America first. Show me America first. But you're not doing anything to do with America first. And when we talk about America first, it's like just don't intervene in other countries and stop, at least stop this support for a blatant genocidal entity, an entity committing war crimes and genocide as confirmed by the International Court for Justice. Is it that difficult? Now, the US, at least when it comes to statements, they are still supporting Israel's right to defend itself. They are still saying, we're going to deploy forces, we're going to make sure that Israel can protect itself, but they're not reaching a level where they are saying we are participating with them in an attack. There's assistance, there's this and there's that, but the United States is not directly going to attack Iran because this attack has different implications, and then we're going to be talking about potentially other superpower involvement, especially when it comes to Russia and China. Russia's already on the way for a defense pact with Iran, and China's the biggest consumer of Chinese oil. And the president of Iran said that China is our main partner, is our biggest partner when it comes to cooperation in the world. So it would be naive to think that there wouldn't be some sort of participation from them directly. And I do not believe that the United States wants that or is even ready for that or is capable to handle that.